Hey, what's up? This is the place where we go out into the world of multilingual learner education to schools, to conferences, and more during the week. And we bring it all back to you. We cross-pollinate in a way. And we bring it back in terms of what themes are bubbling up for the week. This is What's Upriver. So this week started with Monday, February 5th, and the theme that really came up for me in my work this week, getting out there, was pretty strongly collaboration and this concept of collaboration. Um, Sort of arose in different ways. So, what I wanted to do today is first define collaboration in a way that it always helps me to dissect a word, to really think about its meaning. It's one of those words we've used for likely most of our lives. We understand it. We've heard it in school. We've heard it in our workplace. But to me, digging in the kind of root of words and different definitions of words really helps me to frame it differently. So when I think of collaboration, when I look at it physically, the first thing I see is this idea of co or coal and labor, right? This idea that we're coming together, which I think is the popular understanding. Um, this is also the idea of sharing skills, right? We have not, however, always been taught how to do this, how to cooperate. Um, and share together and bring together our skills in a way that's additive to one another. Sometimes I think we view collaboration simply as communication or simply as coming together, but not necessarily in the most productive way. When I look at the definition of collaboration, Merriam-Webster says has many definitions, right? But one of them really stood out to me. And it says to cooperate with an agency or instrumentality with which one is not immediately connected. Now, at first, this definition put me off a little because there's a lot of sort of language in there, right? But when we break it down, bear with me, I think you'll like it too. So, to cooperate, we get that, right? Collaborate is to cooperate, but with the caveat that you're bringing to it and that you're receiving as well an agency and an instrumentality, meaning something that is instrumental to the cause or so important, with which one is not immediately connected. In other words, when we cooperate, we're really bringing together discrete skill sets in order to create something more. I think this piece is often lost in the world of education. We are asked to cooperate a lot. As teachers of multilingual learners, it's integral that we cooperate, but we're rarely asked or told how or given opportunities to develop the how of cooperation. Um, there is a lot of work out there. Recently, I've been reading the work of Dr. Andrea Hagensfeld around co-teaching. I also really like the work of Elena Aguilar around coaching, and really all of these talk about cooperation within this definition here. How do we really get clear on what we bring to the table? And then also, how do we get clear on the goals of cooperation so that we're receiving as well? So to me, this comes back to a lot of the work that I'm doing with ESL teachers. So this week, I've been working side by side with some ESL teachers individually and on small teams that are alike in grade level to help them build unit planning and to work on that planning process around using functional language for their English language development classes. And this has been really helpful because it's giving them a lot of clarity around what their language targets are and how this kind of high leverage language can be useful to their multilingual learners who are trying to learn the language of access for schools, right? Um, But it's also so naturally collaborative. This winds up being a real benefit and oftentimes an incentive for teachers to work within their ESL world with functional language. If we are teaching kind of some of these isolated linguistic themes that don't connect well to the content area, we feel that disconnect. We want to collaborate, I think, naturally as ESL teachers. However, sometimes either because we're stabbing in the dark at what to teach within the big wide world of English, or because we have a very scripted program that's telling us what today's language targets are, we don't feel that deep connection to content. Sometimes this causes a pendular swing so fully to the other side where we wind up simply as ESL teachers reteaching content and focusing on content and maybe pointing out some language along the way. But working with functional language gives what I like to think about as crossbars or linguistic connection points to build cooperative relationships with teachers. Essentially, it's I need to understand your content, that your expertise helps me. And if I can provide some of my expertise around functional language at the different levels of language, vocabulary level, sentence level, discourse level, then I can help inform and improve your world and your instruction in the content sphere. So to me, that's the instrumentality, right, that each has that the other is not immediately connected to. Um, Another place this came up this week is that I was delivering a WIDA 2020 training. And one of the big ideas of the WIDA 2020 document is the integration of content and language, right? So WIDA talks about collaboration, they talk about functional language, all of this, but really at its core is that language, as we know, thrives on context. Content is one potential context for language, and it's the context with which students are in school, right? So, in order to really kind of learn the language of access for school, students need that to be contextualized, right? And we can add and contribute to one another's experiences. The more context we have around the language that we teach, the more it's going to be embedded. There's a deeper cognitive path. There's just more kind of neural networking being developed. We can do this by naturally finding those connection points with our content area teachers. So the more I dive in to my field I'm learning, like as an English language development specialist, the better I can contribute to others, right? This is that instrumentality and agency that you might not have access to, that I don't have access to. Sometimes this feels a little counterintuitive. Um, Sometimes I think we don't have a lot of clarity around our worlds. And the idea of collaboration means we need to sort of understand everybody else's worlds. But these definitions and this work of late has really been teaching me that first, we need to get very clear, an expert in our own fields. And I don't use that word expert lightly. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. However, I think a lot of us sell ourselves short. We have certain content experts with whom we work. And the more they understand and are clear on the content that they're teaching, the better the person who has a deep expertise on the linguistic side can pull out that linguistic piece or make suggestions in that area. So it really does feed, each feeds the other. So I think the counterintuitive piece here is that we need to dive deeply individually into our own fields in order to be more contributory to one another, right? It's like learning my lines in the play. My daughter's going to be in a play this weekend and it's Almost Maine. I don't know if you know it, but I'm very excited to go see her. Um, but I think about this concept of learning your lines in a play. You know, your lines are someone else's cue line. So you may not be able to learn the whole play, nor do you need to, nor would it make sense or really like play out that well. But the better you know yours, the greater the strength and the greater support you can provide those around you. This concept of collaboration is coming up very deeply in our preparation for South by Southwest EDU. So if you haven't been following or haven't seen, I have the fortune, the great fortune to have been chosen to participate with two other wonderful educators on a panel at South by Southwest EDU next month. And our panel is called the Trifecta of Community, Culture, and Collaboration. So we are really digging at this concept of collaboration, but really too at this idea of de-siloing a lot of our work. So once again, this doesn't mean to me that we are all becoming generalists. It means that we are allowing place and space to learn from one another, to allow ourselves to be novice in some areas and expert in others, but also to recognize that we can benefit from the battles that we've individually been fighting, or the misconceptions that we're trying to work against, or the wins that we've had within our field. So on my panel are two other experts. So there's Dr. Deshauna Reed, who is an expert in social emotional learning. She wrote the book SEL for UDL, and she works as well with special education and advocates a lot in that realm. And we have Poonam Saxena, who is a parent impact coach, and she's written, I believe, two books now to helping coaching parents through sort of addressing the parent end of a family partnership. But together, what we recognized is that we've sort of been all inventing the same wheels in our own little spheres, right? We're kind of orbiting in our own little space at the same time, working through very analogous situations, whether it be, ML and special ed trying to get seats at certain tables, or trying to be, or parents, or like being included. There are a lot of pieces, whether it's having clear and consistent protocols and processes in place and expectations. So the strength of coming together has been so apparent because this is a true collaborative where I don't need to know everything about family, working with parents and families. Deshauna doesn't need to know everything about multilingual learner education, but we can draw and map connections that are going to greatly impact and improve one another's fields and draw more attention. Because together we have a strength, right? So we're going to be talking about this at South by Southwest and really sharing some takeaways. Like what can we do actionably to ensure that we work in a way that's not only collaborative, but that's moving everyone forward. Because one win in one quote subgroup is a win somewhere else, right? A win for inclusion for one is a win for inclusion for everyone. And that conversation is going to be, it's just going to be phenomenal. It's being moderated by Mike Palmer, who runs the Trending in Education podcast and Palmer Media. And I'm just really looking forward to the questions and the diversity within the audience and the different backgrounds. But if you haven't been to South by Southwest EDU, consider putting that on your one of your wish list items. It's always in March, probably usually the first week of March. It's always in Austin, Texas. And it's the days before the South by Southwest Digital and Music Festival, which brings in a lot of big names. So this is sort of the EDU is the kind of pre South by Southwest. It's a phenomenal networking event. It really embodies the spirit of collaboration and just being in spaces and letting conversation naturally evolve with people from different backgrounds has opened my eyes up to a lot of potential solutions within the multilingual learner field. Just today, I posted on my Instagram page a post that said, that quoted my friend and colleague, Claudicia Harriel, and I gotta find it. But she said, give me one moment, porfa. Okay, so she said, and this was in conversation together this last week as well, quote, computer programs don't fill gaps, people do. And she was talking about her work in a district that's been struggling with their math scores. And she's like this incredible resource for schools. She really does kind of like she moves the needle on outcomes for kids. But she goes in with some real, like what I called in the post, a lot of straight talk to saying, you know what, we can't rely on computer programs because these kids, they need real teachers, right? What we're doing is we're putting them in front of these different math programs and hoping that they fill in and kind of catch them up. And then we start to teach them rather than putting those students first in front of, the human teacher. And she recognizes too that the reason for a lot of this is because teachers may not feel that they have the skills to, or the resources, or the support, or the background knowledge to really, climb that hill, right? They may not trust in their ability to do so when, especially when they have such a diversity of kids within their classroom. Um, and immediately in this conversation, now we're talking about math, but I'm drawing connection, right? This is collaborative because she is pulling from her experience and her background, and I am able to make that connection to the multilingual learner world. I hear in the ESL message boards consistently, or I see rather, requests for computer programs. Now, we have very limited time with kids to give them all they need to access instruction well, especially in English only settings. And so I don't disagree with the use of computer programs, if they're supplemental, if they're used correctly, but when they supplant the use of a real human teacher, I wonder if, just like Claudicia was saying, it's more about providing teachers with more support so that they know how to be that person that the student needs. They know how to meet the student where they are linguistically, academically, etc., social and emotionally. Because a computer program can't do all that. But if we don't trust our own capacity to do that, then we can't either, right? So I think there's no replacement for the human teacher, and I'm learning that, and I'm thinking more deeply about that because of a colleague's work in a different subgroup or subfield. Finally, I'll share one that's upcoming, and I'll reflect on this more after it happens. But I am going to be speaking at a conference on Tuesday down in Franklin, Massachusetts, put on by the Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth. And the name of the conference is Supporting Recently Arrived Immigrant Students and Their Families. What I am looking forward to most about this conference is the diversity of the names on the panel and the speakers that will be showing up. I plan to be 90% a participant, and then in my 10% a speaker. And I really can't wait to be poured into by people who are not just in the K-12 community. They have speakers in the higher ed community on human development. They have speakers from the medical community talking about trauma and impact, right? So the diversity on that panel is going to really help us truly collaborate because we're able to learn from and pull from one another's areas of expertise. So that's what's up this week, this whole idea of collaboration. I'm going to be thinking about this more deeply. I do think that there needs to be some real conversation around and guidance around how we collaborate on collaborating well, what that looks like, what those expectations are, but also, how we can set that up within our systems to enable teachers to really share with one another and grow. Because I truly believe, just like the inspiration for this series, that when we can cross-pollinate and see each other's work and learn each other's work, it's going to be expansive for all of us. All right. Well, I wish you all a wonderful week, and please reach out if you have questions. Share. Let me know what your thoughts are. All right. I'll see you on the river.